Clara lived in a quiet little town where nothing much ever happened. The streets were lined with old oak trees, and everyone knew each other by name. Life there was predictable, steady, and safe. Clara's days followed a simple rhythm. She woke up early, worked at the local grocery store stocking shelves, came home to water her garden, and spent her evenings curled up on the couch with her 2 cats, Miso and Sushi. To most people in town, she was just another face they passed on the street, kind, polite, but unremarkable. No one would have guessed that beneath her calm exterior lay a spark waiting to ignite. One evening, as Clara sat scrolling through her phone during a rare break from work, something caught her eye. It was a video of Jiu-Jitsu, a martial art she had never heard of before. On the screen, 2 people rolled around on mats, their movements smooth and calculated. One fighter used leverage and technique to control the other, flipping them over like pieces in a chess game. Clara watched, mesmerized. There was something about the way they moved, graceful yet powerful, that made her heart race. For the first time in years, she felt curious about trying something completely out of her comfort zone. Without overthinking it, she searched for gyms nearby and found one offering beginner classes. The idea seemed absurd even to her, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that this might be exactly what she needed. The next day, Clara stood outside the gym, clutching her bag nervously. She had borrowed an oversized t-shirt from her brother and paired it with some loose-fitting shorts, hoping no one would notice how out of place she looked. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of sweat and rubber mats. People of all ages milled about, chatting and stretching. Most wore sleek uniforms called gis, tied neatly with colored belts. Clara stuck out like a sore thumb. Her clothes were too big, her posture unsure, and her sneakers squeaked awkwardly against the floor. As she approached the front desk to sign, a few heads turned her way. Some smiled politely while others exchanged amused glances. "First time?" asked the instructor, a tall man with a shaved head and a friendly voice. Clara nodded, suddenly aware of how sweaty her palms were. "Don't worry," he said, handing her a waiver form. "Everyone starts somewhere." His words were meant to reassure her, but they didn't stop the whispers that rippled through the room. A group of younger students near the corner chuckled, softly, pointing in her direction. One of them whispered loudly enough for her to hear, "She doesn't look like she belongs here." Clara pretended not to notice, signing her name with shaky handwriting. She reminded herself why she had come, to try something new, to challenge herself. Still, the weight of their judgment pressed heavily on her shoulders. Warm-ups began shortly, and Clara quickly realized how unprepared she was. The instructor led the class through jumping jacks, push-ups, and squats, calling out instructions in a booming voice. Within minutes, Clara's face flushed red, and her breathing grew labored. She struggled to keep pace with the others who seemed to move effortlessly. Every time she paused to catch her breath, she could feel eyes on her. A teenage boy smirked as he jogged past her, muttering under his breath, "This is supposed to be fun, right?" Another student laughed outright, shaking their head. Clara clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. She told herself it didn't matter what they thought, but deep down, doubt crept in. Was this a mistake? Did she really belong here? Despite the laughter and sideways glances, Clara refused to give up. When warm-ups ended, the instructor gathered the class to demonstrate basic techniques. He showed them how to fall safely, how to escape from certain positions, and how to apply simple submissions. Clara listened intently, mimicking his movements as best she could. Her body felt stiff and clumsy, but she tried anyway. Each attempt brought more snickers from the sidelines. "Look at her," someone whispered. "She can't even do a proper hip escape." Clara bit her lip, ignoring the comments. She reminded herself that she wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to learn. As the session drew to a close, the instructor paired everyone up for light sparring. Clara found herself facing a young woman barely half her age. The girl bounced lightly on her toes, clearly eager to show off her skills. Clara, on the other hand, stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The moment the instructor said, "Go," the girl pounced, pinning Clara to the mat within seconds. The air rushed out of Clara's lungs as she tapped the mat, signaling defeat. Laughter erupted around her once again. This time, even the instructor chuckled, though he quickly masked it with a cough. Humiliated but determined, Clara forced herself to stand up and try again. And again. By the end of the session, her body ached and her pride was bruised. But she hadn't quit. Not once. Walking home that night, Clara replayed the events in her mind. The laughter, the whispers, the condescending smiles, all of it stung. Yet, amidst the negativity, there was also a flicker of defiance growing inside her. She remembered the instructor's initial reassurance. Everyone starts somewhere. Maybe he was right. Maybe it didn't matter how clumsy or awkward she seemed. Now, what mattered was whether she kept showing up, kept trying. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She wouldn't let anyone's opinion define her journey. She would return to the gym no matter how hard it got. Because somewhere deep down she knew she had untapped potential, and she was ready to uncover it. The following week, Clara returned to the gym, her heart pounding as she pushed open the door. She had spent the past few days replaying the first class in her mind, reliving every moment of embarrassment and doubt. Part of her wanted to turn around and go home, but another part, the stubborn part, refused to let fear win. She reminded herself that she hadn't come this far just to give up. This time, she wore a borrowed GI that fit slightly better, though it still felt foreign against her skin. As she walked in, the same mix of curious glances greeted her, but she held her head higher than before. She wasn't there to prove anything to anyone, she told herself. She was there for herself. Warm-ups began again, and Clara gritted her teeth through every exercise. Her legs burned during squats and her arms trembled as she struggled to hold a plank position. The instructor called out corrections, his voice sharp but fair. "Keep your core tight," he barked. Clara clenched her jaw, focusing on the burn in her muscles instead of the snickers from nearby students. One of them, a boy with spiky hair, mimicked her awkward movements when the instructor wasn't looking. Clara caught him out of the corner of her eye but chose to ignore it. She repeated a silent mantra in her head. "I'm stronger than this. I can do this." By the time warm-ups ended, sweat dripped down her face, but she felt a small sense of accomplishment. She had survived the hardest part, or so she thought. The instructor moved on to teaching basic techniques, demonstrating how to perform a simple sweep from guard position. Clara watched closely, trying to memorize each step. When it was time to practice, she paired up with an older man named Greg, who seemed kind enough. He smiled warmly and said, "Don't worry, we'll take it slow." But even with his encouragement, Clara fumbled. Her timing was off, her movements clumsy. Every attempt ended with her falling flat on her back or getting tangled in her own limbs. Greg patiently guided her, offering tips like, "Shift your weight here," or "Use your hips more." But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to get it right. Around her, other pairs flowed effortlessly, their techniques smooth and confident. Clara's frustration mounted with each failed attempt. By the middle of the session, Clara's confidence was waning. The room felt hotter, the air heavier. She could feel the eyes of others on her, judging her every move. A younger student nearby muttered, "She's hopeless," loud enough for her to hear. Clara froze, her cheeks burning. For a moment, she considered walking out. What was the point of staying if everyone already thought she couldn't succeed? But then she remembered why she had started this journey in the first place. To challenge herself, to grow. Giving up now would mean letting those voices win. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to focus. She asked Greg to walk her through the technique one more time, step by painful step. This time something clicked. As Greg guided her through the motion, Clara felt a spark of understanding. Her body moved more naturally, her weight shifting where it needed to. With a final push, she managed to sweep him off balance, sending him tumbling onto the mat. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Greg grinned, giving her a thumbs up. "See? You've got it," he said. Clara couldn't help but smile back, a rush of pride washing over her. For the first time since starting jiu-jitsu, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she wasn't hopeless after all. As the weeks went by, Clara kept showing up, rain or shine. She attended every class, arriving early and staying late to practice on her own. While others focused on flashy moves or complex techniques, Clara stuck to the basics. She drilled escapes, submissions, and transitions until her muscles ached, and her gi smelled permanently of sweat. Each repetition brought her closer to mastery, even if it didn't look like much to outsiders. Some students still laughed at her struggles, especially when she got tapped out quickly during sparring sessions. But Clara learned to tune them out, focusing instead on the sound of her own breathing and the rhythm of her movements. Slowly but surely, she began to improve. One evening after class, Clara stayed behind to work on her guard passing. She sprawled on the mat, practicing the same sequence over and over again. An advanced student, a tall, muscular man named Jake, noticed her efforts and approached her. "Need some help?" he asked, his tone casual but not unkind. Clara hesitated, unsure if she should accept. Jake was a black belt, someone who had trained for years. What could he possibly learn from her? But then she nodded, deciding it wouldn't hurt to try. Together they worked through the technique, Jake offering pointers while Clara adjusted her grip and posture. His advice was practical and clear, helping her refine her approach. By the end of their session, Clara felt a newfound sense of confidence. Perhaps not all the advanced students were dismissive of her after all. Jake's kindness left a lasting impression on Clara. It reminded her that not everyone in the gym judged her harshly. In fact, many of the more experienced practitioners respected her determination even if they didn't say so outright. They saw how hard she worked, how she refused to quit despite the odds stacked against her. Clara realized that jiu-jitsu wasn't just about physical strength. It was about mindset, patience, and perseverance. These lessons carried over into other areas of her life. At work, she found herself tackling tasks with renewed energy. At home, she tackled chores with the same discipline she applied on the mats. Bit by bit, Clara was transforming, not just as a martial artist but as a person. Despite her growing confidence, Clara knew she still had a long way to go. There were days when she doubted herself, when the weight of criticism felt unbearable. But she clung to the small victories, the moments of clarity that reminded her why she kept coming back. Whether it was landing a successful sweep or simply enduring an exhausting round of sparring, each triumph fueled her resolve. She began to see jiu-jitsu not as a battle against others but as a journey of self-discovery. Each roll, each drill, each drop of sweat brought her closer to understanding her own potential. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Clara knew one thing for sure: she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Clara's routine became steady and predictable, much like the rhythm of her breathing during training. Every evening after work, she would change into her gi, lace up her worn-out sneakers, and head to the gym. The familiar scent of sweat and rubber mats greeted her as soon as she stepped inside. By now, the faces around her were no longer strangers. They were teammates, rivals, and sometimes critics. But Clara didn't let any of that distract her. She had learned to focus on what mattered most: improving herself. Her progress was slow, almost imperceptible to outsiders, but she could feel it in her bones. Each day she grew a little stronger, a little faster, and a little smarter on the mat. One particular evening, the instructor announced a surprise sparring session for beginners. "It's good practice," he said with a grin, "and who knows, you might surprise yourselves." Clara swallowed hard. Sparring sessions always made her nervous, especially when paired with more experienced students. Still, she nodded along with the others, trying to appear calm. When it was time to pair up, Clara found herself facing Jake again, the same black belt who had helped her with guard passing weeks earlier. He smiled reassuringly, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping into her chest. How could she possibly hold her own against someone so skilled? The match began, and Jake wasted no time going on the offensive. He moved quickly, using his height and strength to pressure Clara from above. Instinctively, she scrambled to defend herself, gripping his sleeves tightly and keeping her elbows close to her body. Her heart raced as she tried to remember everything she had practiced. Block his grips, create space, stay calm. But Jake was relentless, shifting his weight and searching for openings. Within seconds, he secured side control, pinning her to the mat. Clara tapped out almost immediately, gasping for air as he released her. Around them, a few students chuckled. "Nice try," one muttered under their breath. Clara forced a weak smile, pretending not to care, but inside, she felt crushed. Jake noticed her disappointment and leaned in to speak softly. "Don't worry about losing," he said. "Focus on learning. Let's try again, okay?" His words struck a chord with Clara. She realized that every tap-out wasn't a failure. It was an opportunity to grow. With renewed determination, she reset her position and prepared for another round. This time she paid closer attention to Jake's movements, studying how he shifted his weight and controlled angles. When he came in for side control again, she reacted differently. Instead of panicking, she bridged her hips upward, creating just enough space to slip free. To her amazement, the escape worked. Jake raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Good job," he said simply before resuming his attack. Round after round, Clara pushed herself harder than ever. She got tapped out repeatedly, but each attempt taught her something new. She discovered how to anticipate Jake's moves, how to use leverage instead of brute force, and how to stay composed even when things seemed hopeless. By the end of the session, her guy was soaked with sweat, and her muscles screamed in protest. But for the first time, she didn't feel defeated. Instead, she felt proud. She had faced one of the toughest opponents in the gym, and while she hadn't won, she had held her ground. That alone was worth celebrating. Word of Clara's persistence spread quietly among the other students. At first, they dismissed her as a novelty, a middle-aged woman with no prior experience who somehow kept showing up. But as weeks turned into months, they began to notice subtle changes in her technique. Her movements became sharper, her defenses tighter. During drills, she executed basic submissions with precision, earning nods of approval from the instructor. Even those who had once laughed at her started paying attention. They saw how she embraced challenges, refusing to back down even when things got tough. Slowly but surely, the mocking whispers faded, replaced by grudging respect. One day, after art class, a young student approached Clara hesitantly. His name was Liam, a teenager with fiery red hair and a cocky attitude. He had been one of the loudest critics in the beginning, often making snide remarks about her performance. Now, however, he looked sheepish as he spoke. "Hey, I wanted to say sorry," he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't think you'd stick around this long. You're actually pretty good." Clara blinked in surprise, then smiled warmly. "Thanks," she replied. "But don't give me too much credit, I'm still learning." Liam grinned awkwardly before walking away, leaving Clara to reflect on how far she had come. Apologies, like his, were rare, but they reminded her that her journey wasn't just about personal growth. It was also about changing perceptions. As Clara continued training, she began to embrace the mental side of Jiu-Jitsu. It wasn't just about physical strength or technical skill. It was about strategy, patience, and adaptability. Every roll was like a puzzle, requiring quick thinking and creativity. She started seeing patterns in her opponent's movements, anticipating their next steps and adjusting her game plan accordingly. Her favorite moment came when she successfully countered a move she had struggled with for weeks. The satisfaction of pulling it off was indescribable, a reminder that persistence paid off. These small victories fueled her passion, driving her to push even harder. Outside the gym, Clara's transformation became evident in other areas of her life. At work, she handled stressful situations with newfound composure, drawing on the same resilience she practiced on the mats. At home, she tackled projects she had once avoided, confident in her ability to solve problems. Even her relationships improved. Friends and co-workers noticed a change in her demeanor. She seemed more confident, more grounded. When asked about it, Clara shrugged modestly. "I guess I've been challenging myself lately," she said with a smile. "It's amazing what you can do when you stop doubting yourself." Despite her progress, Clara knew there would always be room for improvement. Jiu-Jitsu was a lifelong journey, one that demanded humility and dedication. She accepted this truth without hesitation, embracing both the highs and lows of her training. Some days she felt unstoppable, landing sweeps and submissions with ease. Other days, she struggled to keep up, getting tapped out repeatedly by even the greenest beginners. But through it all, she remained steadfast, knowing that every setback was part of the process. Her goal wasn't perfection, it was growth. And growth, she realized, was its own reward. By the time she reached her 6th month of training, Clara had earned a reputation in the gym. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but she was consistent. She showed up, put in the work, and refused to give up. Her classmates admired her tenacity, often seeking her advice during drills. "How did you get so calm under pressure?" one beginner asked during a particularly chaotic sparring session. Clara thought for a moment before replying, "I remind myself that it's okay to make mistakes. The key is to keep moving forward." Her answer resonated with those around her, inspiring them to adopt the same mindset. Clara may have started as an outsider, but now she was becoming a pillar of the community, one sweaty, determined step at a time. Clara's 7th month of training marked a turning point, though she didn't realize it at first. The gym had grown busier, with new students joining almost every week. Some were young and eager, while others were older and hesitant, much like Clara had been when she first started. Watching them stumble through basic drills brought back memories of her own early struggles. She remembered the laughter, the whispers, the moments of doubt that had once threatened to break her spirit. But now, as she moved confidently across the mats, executing techniques with precision, she felt a deep sense of pride, not just in herself, but in how far she had come. One evening, the instructor announced a special event, an open sparring session where students could test their skills against anyone, regardless of rank or experience. "It's voluntary," he said, scanning the room. "But I encourage everyone to participate. It's a great way to learn." Clara's stomach churned at the thought. Facing beginners was one thing, but rolling with higher belts, especially black belts, felt intimidating. Still, something inside her whispered, why not? She had spent months drilling basics, refining her technique, and building endurance. Maybe it was time to see what she was truly capable of. With a deep breath, she raised her hand to volunteer. When the session began, Clara found herself paired with Jake again. He gave her a reassuring smile, but his eyes held a glint of challenge. "Ready?" he asked. Clara nodded, her heart pounding as they took their positions on the mat. Jake went on the offensive immediately, using his size and skill to dominate from the top. Clara focused on staying calm, remembering everything she had learned. She defended stubbornly, framing her arms to create space and bridging her hips to escape. For several minutes they exchanged positions, neither gaining a clear advantage. Then, unexpectedly, Jake paused. "You're doing great," he said with genuine admiration. "Let's try something different." In that moment, Clara realized Jake wasn't just testing her, he was teaching her. His attacks became less aggressive, more deliberate, allowing her to experiment with counters she had only practiced in drills. When she attempted a triangle choke, a submission she had drilled countless times, it nearly worked. Jake escaped, just in time, laughing as he tapped her shoulder. "Close call," he said. Clara grinned, exhilarated by the near success. Though she eventually tapped out, the match left her buzzing with energy. She hadn't won, but she had held her own against someone far more experienced. That alone was a victory. As the session continued, Clara faced other opponents, each presenting unique challenges. A purple belt tested her guard retention, forcing her to adapt quickly to avoid being passed. A brown belt pushed her stamina to its limits, keeping constant pressure until she could barely breathe. Each roll pushed her beyond her comfort zone, revealing weaknesses she hadn't noticed before. Yet instead of feeling discouraged, Clara embraced these lessons. Every tap out was an opportunity to improve, every struggle a chance to grow. By the end of the night, her body ached, but her mind felt alive with possibilities. The next day, word spread about Clara's performance during the sparring session. Students who had previously dismissed her now approached her with questions. "How did you stay so calm under pressure?" one asked. "What's your secret to escaping bad positions?" another wondered. Clara answered honestly, sharing tips she had picked up along the way. "Focus on the basics," she advised, "and don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how you learn." Her humility struck a chord with many, especially newer students, who admired her willingness to help despite her own ongoing journey. Without realizing it, Clara had become a role model, a source of inspiration for those still finding their footing. Despite her growing confidence, Clara remained grounded. She knew there was always more to learn, always another level to reach. During one class, the instructor introduced a complex guard sweep that left even advanced students scratching their heads. Clara struggled with it too, repeatedly falling, flat on her back as she attempted the move. Frustration bubbled inside her, threatening to derail her focus. But instead of giving up, she stayed late after class, practicing the technique over and over again. By the time she finally nailed it, her GI was drenched in sweat, and her muscles screamed in protest. Yet, the satisfaction of mastering the sweep made every drop of effort worthwhile. Outside the gym, Clara's transformation continued to ripple through her life. At work, she tackled difficult tasks with the same resilience she applied on the mats. When a coworker complained about a particularly challenging project, Clara offered simple yet effective advice. Break it down into smaller steps. Focus on one thing at a time. Her words resonated deeply, earning her praise from both colleagues and supervisors. At home, she rediscovered hobbies she had abandoned years ago, such as painting and gardening, approaching them with renewed enthusiasm. Even her cats, Miso and Sushi, seemed to notice the change, curling up beside her more often as if drawn to her newfound energy. Clara's dedication inspired others to push themselves harder. One evening, a shy teenager named Emma approached her after class. "I wanted to quit last month," Emma admitted, her voice trembling. "But watching you keep going, it made me think maybe I should stick it out too." Clara listened intently, nodding in understanding. "It's okay to feel like quitting," she said gently. "We all have those moments. The trick is to take it one day at a time. You'll surprise yourself with what you can achieve." Emma smiled gratefully, her eyes shining with determination. Moments like these reminded Clara why she loved Jiu-Jitsu, not just for the physical challenge, but for the connections it fostered. As weeks turned into months, Clara's reputation in the gym solidified. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but she was relentless. Her classmates respected her for her work ethic and humility, often seeking her guidance during drills. Even the instructor began relying on her to assist newer students, recognizing her ability to explain concepts in simple terms. "Clara has a gift for teaching," he told the class one evening. "She reminds us that Jiu-Jitsu isn't about ego, it's about growth." The praise caught Clara off guard, but she accepted it graciously, knowing it wasn't about her. It was about the community they were building together. Still, Clara refused to let success go to her head. She reminded herself daily that Jiu-Jitsu was a lifelong journey, one that demanded constant effort and humility. There were days when she felt unstoppable, executing submissions with ease and dominating rolls against lower belts. Other days, she struggled to keep up, getting tapped out repeatedly by even the greenest beginners. But through it all, she remained steadfast, knowing that every setback was part of the process. Her goal wasn't perfection, it was progress. And progress, she realized, came not from winning, but from learning. By the time she reached her 8th month of training, Clara had earned a nickname among her peers, the Quiet Storm. It suited her perfectly. On the surface, she appeared calm and unassuming, blending into the background. But on the mats, she unleashed a fierce determination. That surprised everyone, including herself. She still made mistakes, still faced challenges, but she no longer feared them. Instead, she welcomed them, knowing they were stepping stones on her path to mastery. Clara may have started as an outsider, mocked and underestimated, but now she was proving that true strength came not from physical power but from persistence, patience, and heart. Clara's 9th month of training brought a new challenge, one that would test not only her skills but also her resolve. The gym announced its annual in-house tournament, an event designed to give students a taste of competition without the pressure of official rankings. Everyone was encouraged to participate regardless of skill level. For Clara, the idea of stepping onto a mat in front of an audience felt terrifying. She had grown comfortable with sparring during classes, but competing? That was something else entirely. Still, she couldn't ignore the tiny voice inside her urging her to try. After all, wasn't this what she had been working toward? A chance to see how far she had come? The weeks leading up to the tournament were intense. Clara trained harder than ever, refining her techniques and drilling submissions until her muscles burned. She practiced escaping bad positions, focusing on staying calm under pressure. Her teammates cheered her on, offering tips and encouragement. "You've got this," Jake told her one evening after a particularly grueling session. "Just trust yourself." His words stuck with her, reminding her that confidence came not from avoiding fear, but from facing it head-on. On the day of the tournament, the gym buzzed with excitement. Mats filled the center of the room, surrounded by chairs for spectators. Friends, family members, and fellow students gathered to watch, their chatter filling the air. Clara sat quietly in a corner, tying her belt with trembling hands. Her stomach churned as she watched higher belts warm up nearby, their movements fluid and effortless. Doubt crept into her mind. What if she embarrassed herself? What if she let everyone down? But then she remembered why she had signed up. Not to win, but to grow. Taking a deep breath, she stood up and joined the lineup of competitors. Clara's first match was against a beginner like herself, a young woman named Sarah who had only been training for 3 months. They shook hands before taking their positions on the mat, both visibly nervous. When the referee signaled the start, Clara focused on staying relaxed. She moved cautiously at first, testing Sarah's defenses and looking for openings. To her surprise, Sarah proved tougher than expected, using quick reflexes to counter Clara's attacks. For several minutes, they exchanged positions, neither gaining a clear advantage. Then Clara spotted an opportunity. As Sarah reached for a grip, Clara slipped free and secured a tight armbar. The tap came almost instantly, leaving Clara stunned. She had won her first match, and in front of an audience no less. The victory gave Clara a surge of confidence, but the next round proved far more challenging. Her opponent was a blue belt with years of experience. From the moment the match began, Clara found herself on the defensive, struggling to keep up with her opponent's speed and technique. Every attempt to escape ended in failure. Every submission attempt countered effortlessly. By the time the referee called the match, Clara knew she hadn't stood a chance. Yet as she bowed to her opponent and stepped off the mat, she felt oddly proud. She had faced someone far more skilled and hadn't backed down. That alone was worth celebrating. After the tournament, Clara reflected on her performance. She hadn't advanced beyond the second round, but that didn't matter. What mattered was the courage she had shown, the lessons she had learned. Each match had revealed weaknesses she hadn't noticed before, gaps in her guard retention, lapses in her timing, but they also highlighted areas where she excelled. Her determination and resilience earned praise from both instructors and peers. "That's the spirit of Jiu-Jitsu," the instructor said during a post-tournament debrief. "It's not about winning or losing. It's about improving." In the weeks that followed, Clara threw herself back into training with renewed focus. She worked tirelessly to address the gaps exposed during the tournament, drilling specific techniques and seeking feedback from higher belts. Jake became a regular sparring partner, pushing her to adapt to different styles and strategies. "You're getting better every day," he told her after one particularly tough roll. "Keep this up and you'll surprise even yourself." Clara smiled, grateful for his support. She knew there was still much to learn, but she felt more confident than ever in her ability to overcome challenges. Outside the gym, Clara's growth continued to inspire those around her. At work, she volunteered to lead a team project, applying the same problem-solving mindset she used on the mats. When obstacles arose, she tackled them methodically, breaking each issue into manageable steps. Her co-workers marveled at her composure, often asking how she stayed so calm under pressure. "I remind myself that every problem has a solution," she explained. "Sometimes you just need to take it one step at a time." Her approach earned her respect and admiration, solidifying her reputation as a natural leader. At home, Clara embraced new hobbies, channeling her energy into activities she had once avoided. She took up yoga to improve her flexibility, discovering unexpected parallels between breath control and mindfulness in Jiu-Jitsu. She also started journaling, documenting her thoughts and reflections after each training session. Writing helped her process her experiences, turning setbacks into lessons and victories into motivation. Even her cat seemed to notice the change, curling up beside her as she wrote, as if sensing her contentment. Clara's journey inspired others to push themselves harder. One evening, a shy teenager named Mia approached her after class. "I want to compete next year," Mia confessed, her voice trembling with excitement. "But I'm scared I'll mess up." Clara listened intently, nodding and understanding. "It's okay to be scared," she said gently. "Everyone feels that way at first. Just remember why you started. Focus on doing your best, and everything else will fall into place." Mia smiled gratefully, her eyes shining with determination. Moments like these reminded Clara why she loved Jiu-Jitsu, not just for the physical challenge but for the connections it fostered. As months passed, Clara's reputation in the gym grew stronger. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but she was relentless. Her classmates admired her humility and dedication, often seeking her advice during drills. Even the instructor relied on her to mentor newer students, recognizing her ability to explain concepts in simple terms. "Clara reminds us what Jiu-Jitsu is really about," he told the class one evening. "It's not about ego, it's about growth." The praise caught Clara off guard, but she accepted it graciously, knowing it wasn't about her. It was about the community they were building together. Still, Clara refused to let success go to her head. She reminded herself daily that Jiu-Jitsu was a lifelong journey, one that demanded constant effort and humility. There were days when she felt unstoppable, executing submissions with ease and dominating rolls against lower belts. Other days she struggled to keep up, getting tapped out repeatedly by even the greenest beginners. But through it all, she remained steadfast, knowing that every setback was part of the process. Her goal wasn't perfection, it was progress. And progress, she realized, came not from winning, but from learning. By the time she reached her 10th month of training, Clara had become a cornerstone of the gym. She wasn't just a student anymore, she was a teacher, a motivator, and a friend. Her quiet determination reminded everyone that true strength came not from physical power, but from persistence, patience, and heart. Clara may have started as an outsider, mocked and underestimated, but now she was proving that anyone could achieve greatness with enough effort and belief in themselves. Her journey was far from over, but she knew one thing for sure: she was ready for whatever lay ahead. By the time Clara reached her 11th month of training, she had become a fixture at the gym. Her presence was steady and dependable, like the rhythm of her breathing during rolls. She wasn't flashy or loud. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, but her actions spoke volumes. Every day she showed up with determination in her eyes and grit in her heart. She drilled techniques until her muscles ached, sparred with opponents who challenged her limits, and mentored beginners who looked up to her. People no longer saw her as the simple woman who didn't belong. Instead, they saw her as someone who embodied the spirit of Jiu-Jitsu: perseverance, humility, and growth. One evening, the instructor called everyone together for an announcement. He stood at the front of the room, his voice carrying over the hum of conversation. "We're hosting a special sparring session next week," he said, scanning the faces before him. "It's open to all ranks, but I want you to push yourselves. Treat it like a real competition." The room buzzed with excitement, but Clara felt a familiar knot tighten in her stomach. Pushing herself meant facing tougher opponents, testing skills she wasn't sure were ready. Yet something inside her whispered, "You've come this far. Trust yourself." With a deep breath, she raised her hand to volunteer. The day of the session arrived and the gym was packed. Students lined up along the walls, watching intently as matches unfolded on the mats. Clara waited patiently for her turn, her palms sweaty despite the cool air. When her name was called, she stepped forward, her opponent none other than Jake, the black belt who had helped her countless times before. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small nod of encouragement. As they took their positions, Clara reminded herself of everything she had learned. Stay calm, focus on the basics, and never give up. The match began, and Jake came in strong, using his size and experience to pressure Clara from above. She defended stubbornly, framing her arms and bridging her hips to create space. For several minutes they exchanged positions, neither gaining a clear advantage. Then, unexpectedly, Clara spotted an opening. As Jake shifted his weight, she slipped into a triangle choke, a move she had practiced thousands of times. Before he could react, she locked it in tight. Jake tapped out almost immediately, leaving the room in stunned silence. 14 seconds, that's all it took. Clara froze, hardly believing what had just happened. She had tapped a black belt, and in record time, the applause that followed was thunderous. Students clapped and cheered, some even jumping to their feet. Clara stood up slowly, shaking hands with Jake, who grinned widely. "That was perfect execution," he said, his tone filled with admiration. "You earned it," Clara managed, a shy smile, still processing what had happened. She hadn't set out to impress anyone, yet here she was, proving that hard work and dedication could overcome even the toughest odds. The moment was surreal, but it was also deeply satisfying, a testament to how far she had come. Word of Clara's victory spread quickly throughout the gym. Those who had once doubted her now approached her with newfound respect. "How did you pull that off?" one student asked, wide-eyed. Clara shrugged modestly, explaining that she had simply focused on the basics. "It's not about being fancy," she said. "It's about doing the fundamentals well." Her answer resonated with many, especially newer students who admired her humility. They saw her not just as a skilled practitioner, but as proof that anyone could succeed with enough effort. In the weeks that followed, Clara continued to train with the same intensity as always. She knew that one impressive performance didn't define her journey. It was just another step forward. There were still days when she struggled, getting tapped out by lower belts or failing to execute a technique she thought she had mastered. But she embraced these moments, knowing they were opportunities to learn. Each setback fueled her determination, pushing her to refine her skills and expand her knowledge. Jiu-Jitsu, she realized, was like life itself, full of challenges, victories, and lessons waiting to be discovered. Outside the gym, Clara's influence grew stronger. At work, she became known for her problem-solving abilities, often leading projects with the same calm confidence she displayed on the mats. Her co-workers sought her advice, trusting her judgment and appreciating her supportive nature. At home, she found joy in small things, tending to her garden, playing with her cats, or writing in her journal. These activities grounded her, reminding her of the balance between discipline and relaxation. Even strangers noticed a change in her demeanor. Clerks at the grocery store commented on her cheerful attitude, while neighbors complimented her kindness. Clara's transformation extended beyond the mats, touching every corner of her life. Clara's story inspired others to pursue their own dreams. One evening, a young mother named Lisa approached her after class. "I've been thinking about joining," Lisa said hesitantly. "But I'm not sure I can do it. I'm too old, too out of shape." Her voice trailed off, uncertainty written across her face. Clara listened carefully, nodding in understanding. "I felt the same way when I started," she replied gently. "But you don't have to be perfect to begin. Just show up, and the rest will follow." Lisa smiled, gratitude shining in her eyes. Moments like these reminded Clara why she loved Jiu-Jitsu, not just for the physical challenge, but for the connections it forged and the lives it touched. As months turned into a year, Clara reflected on her journey. She had started as an outsider, mocked and underestimated, yet she had transformed into someone others looked up to. Her growth wasn't measured by belts or trophies, but by the strength she had found within herself. She had faced fear, doubt, and failure, and emerged stronger each time. Jiu-Jitsu had taught her that true power came not from dominating others but from overcoming her own limitations. It was a lesson she carried with her everywhere she went. On the anniversary of her first class, Clara stood in the same gym where her journey had begun. The room smelled the same, sweat and rubber mats, but everything else had changed. She wasn't the awkward beginner anymore. She was a respected member of the community, known for her skill, humility, and heart. As she watched new students struggle through warm-ups and drills, she felt a pang of nostalgia. She remembered how it felt to be in their shoes, unsure and self-conscious. But she also remembered the spark of curiosity that had driven her to keep going. When asked about her secret to success, Clara smiled softly. "I didn't set out to prove anything to anyone except myself," she said. "I just wanted to get better one step at a time." Her words echoed through the room, inspiring those who heard them. Clara's legacy lived on in the countless lives she touched, both on and off the mats. She may have started as an unassuming woman with no athletic background, but she had proven that greatness wasn't reserved for the naturally gifted. It belonged to anyone willing to put in the work, embrace the grind, and believe in themselves. And though Clara never sought recognition, her story became a beacon of hope for anyone daring to chase their dreams.